Africa is not merely important, it is essential. African partnerships are critical for the Department of Defense to maintain its technological edge, accomplish its geopolitical and strategic objectives, and power our futures.
Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Now, the lady at the beginning of the video was Celeste Wallander. I've spoken about Celeste Wallander many times on my channel, and I appreciate Celeste Wallander because she is a very honest individual. I believe that she is the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security. And in her job description, she is basically involved in managing and coordinating the defensive relationships that the United States has with other countries. Military partnership, security cooperation, military alliances, military agreements, promoting U.S. interests abroad through defense strategies, etc., etc. She helps shapes United States defense policies in regions like Africa, etc., etc. Now, in today's video, we're going to be talking about Gabon, right? I believe Gabon is in Western Central Africa, somewhere around there. Now, when we hear about the Western powers talking about their commitment to democracy and things like that. Now, of course, on my channel, I've already debunked that. We've already come to the conclusion that they do not truly care about democracy. It's all about defending their interests, right? So if their interests go against the virtues of democracy, they'll easily break the commandments of democracy to defend their interests. Now, in the case of Gabon, the government of Gabon was overthrown in a military takeover sometime last year. And you would think that, similar to what happened in nations like Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, where there were calls for military intervention and the restoration of democracy, in Gabon, you didn't really see the same thing happen. You didn't really see the coup d'etat in Gabon was received with the same level of criticism or hostility. In fact, it was welcomed by the Western media. The military leader in Gabon was embraced by France. He was embraced by the United States. He was embraced by the Western nations. Instead of sanctions or isolation, this man who took power by the force of arms, keep in mind, he was welcomed by President Macron in Paris. He was welcomed by the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, as if he was a democratically elected head of state. Now, you might ask, why is that? Because, in my opinion, it's due to the fact that he was very cooperative. The new leader in Gabon was very eager to sign contracts with France and the United States and giving them access to whatever they wanted. And when you dig deep into this guy's background, take a look up on the screen. According to a 2020 Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project investigation, he owns several properties in the United States worth more than $1 million and also helped expand the Bongo's overseas businesses. And when asked about these dealings, he said they were a private affair. Now, I already knew this guy was not a revolutionary when I found out that he was actually the cousin of the president that he actually overthrew. So the old president in Gabon was Ali Bongo, who was the son of the previous president Omar Bongo, who was in power since like the 1960s. So this guy right here who is in power right now, this is simply a continuation of the Bongo family dynasty that has been in power since decades and decades before. So obviously, if one family has been ruling the country since the 1960s, obviously this is not democracy. But like I said, they'll easily go against democracy as long as it serves their interests. But back to what I said about the corruption investigation, where this man was found to have millions of dollars of property in the United States as well as business interests outside of the country. The Western powers have a long history of throwing their support behind leaders who have questionable backgrounds, leaders who have business interests overseas, properties in foreign countries, or simply corrupt dealings in their past. And why is that? Because compromised leaders, in my opinion, are easier to control. When you look at the military leaders in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, who have received nothing but condemnation and criticism from the Western powers, those men, they don't have foreign interests overseas. They don't have bank accounts in foreign countries, right? So they cannot be blackmailed or sanctioned. Thus, they're not able to be controlled in the same manner. They cannot be blackmailed in the same manner. And I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the headlines lately, but recently, the former Haitian president, Michel Martelly, was actually sanctioned by the U.S. government over his role in the drug trade. Apparently, he's been exposed as a high-level drug trafficker. Now, many of us already knew this. Many of us already know that his brother-in-law is like, the trapper of the year, big heavyweight drug dealer. But now it's been exposed in front of the entire world. But the ironic thing about it was when he was in office, similar to the leader of Gabon, he was embraced by the Western powers. He was embraced at the White House. Take a look up on the screen. Michel Martelly served as president from 2011 to 2016, taking office after the devastating 2010 earthquake. The United States Treasury Department in a statement said that Martelly abused his influence to facilitate the trafficking of dangerous drugs, including cocaine, destined for the United States. Now, the United States, they got the FBI, they got the CIA, they got all their different three-letter agencies. So you mean to tell me that they didn't know that he was the trapper of the year? You mean to tell me they didn't know that he was the hustler of the year? You mean to tell me they didn't know that he was moving bricks like Pablo Escobar across the country? I refuse to believe that. But like I said, the Western powers, they prefer dealing with these corrupt leaders, these compromised leaders, because they are more easy to control. They're more predictable. And also, if you're willing to engage in criminality or shady business dealings, then obviously you'll sell your country out for personal gain. And of course, when they no longer need you or when you're no longer useful, then they will throw you under the bus. And that's why when it comes to leaders who have clean records, leaders with integrity, leaders who actually have a genuine love and concern for their people, those men are harder to manipulate. Those men cannot be blackmailed with offshore bank accounts and foreign real estate and skeletons in their closet, right? These are the types of leaders who would actually push back against unfair deals, who would demand accountability from the Western powers, who refuse to sell out their country. And that's why the Western powers typically don't want to deal with those men. They don't want to deal with black men who have integrity, right? They want to deal with the compromised leader, the drug dealing, corrupt leader, the leader with the offshore bank accounts and the property overseas. They rather to support his campaign. They want him in power because, like I said, they are more controllable and more predictable. Now, back to the leader in Gabon. I recently saw that he had a meeting with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, where they discussed their mutual partnerships and the recent contracts and agreements that they had signed. So let's get into it, man. Let's take a look at this press release from the State Department. The United States welcomes transitional President Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema to reaffirm and deepen the 64 years of strong partnership and cooperation between the people of the United States and Gabon. Through this visit, the United States is seeking to strengthen and elevate our partnerships with Gabon on matters of mutual interest, including strong partnerships to protect the environment, foster economic development, and strengthen regional security. The United States Chamber of Commerce launched the United States Gabon Investment Guide and hosted the United States Gabon Executive Business Roundtable on October 1st. The launch of the Investment Guide is a recognition of the immense capacity for economic partnership and seeks to promote greater collaboration between our two nations while supporting increased private sector engagement towards greater mutual prosperity. Now, when it comes to Gabon, even though it's a very tiny country in comparison to other African nations, don't get it twisted. It's a very rich nation in terms of its mineral capacity, its mineral resources. Very rich. It should be, based on its size and in comparison to the amount of resources they have, they should be one of the wealthiest and most prosperous nations on the planet, if you ask me. We're talking about an immense supply of oil, manganese, timber, uranium, gold, right? Things that have powered the French economy for decades, right? And now, obviously, the United States, they want to get a piece of the action. What's even more ironic is that the Western media and Western nations try to frame these relationships as if it's the United States doing charity for Gabon, when the reality is actually the exact opposite. It's actually Gabon doing charity for the United States by allowing its wealth to fuel the American economy. The United States tries to portray itself as some type of benefactor, when in reality, you're the charity case. The United States is truly the charity case in this scenario. Because in the end, these economic deals between Gabon and the United States will ultimately benefit American corporations and American citizens at the end of the day. So who really needs who in this scenario, right? Does Gabon need the United States, or does the United States need Gabon? Celeste Wallander said it herself, right? The United States needs to maintain its African partnerships in order to maintain their technological, economic, and geopolitical dominance. She said it herself, a top U.S. official. She admitted it herself. So that's why when the military leader in Gabon is willing to cooperate with the Western powers, even though he took power in a coup d'etat, he is welcomed and embraced. But meanwhile, the leaders in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, who did the exact same thing, they took power in a military coup d'etat, they are branded as enemies of democracy. But as you can see, it's not about democracy. It's about control. It's about who's willing to play ball. It's about who's willing to cooperate, right? That's all it is. It's about the maintenance and defensive interest. That's all it's about, man. Let's continue. The United States and Gabon have shared interest in supporting the reliability of critical mineral supply chains. Working with the United States Congress, the U.S. Department of State intends to undertake technical cooperation to assist Gabon with understanding the extent of its critical mineral resource potential, strengthening the competitiveness of Gabon's investment frameworks, and helping it identify paths to market for critical mineral resource development through quality investment that benefits the people of Gabon. The department intends to conduct an assessment visit in the coming months to discuss Gabon's priorities and cooperation interest areas subject to the availability of funds. Now, when you see deceptive language like technical cooperation, investment frameworks, quality investments, right? You got to read between the lines, because on the surface, they're framing this as, a charity mission, or we are here to help the blacks of Gabon, right? To understand their resource potential and strengthen their competitiveness and benefit the people, right? But here's the truth, man. This is not charity. Nations are not in the business of doing charity, right? They are in the business of maintaining and defending their interests. This is about securing U.S. access to Gabon's critical minerals for its own economic interests, right? They don't got love in their heart for the blacks of Gabon, man. Listen, don't get it twisted, man. Don't get it twisted. When you see them say things like securing critical mineral supply chains, right? That means they want to lock down access to the mineral wealth to make sure that it benefits American industries. Listen, you have to understand the language they use, man. You have to understand the U.S. State Department has some of the best lawyers in the world, so they are very articulate. They're very slick with the word game, so you got to stay, you got to stay on your toes, man. Now, like I said, Gabon is very rich in, manganese, oil, gold, etc., right? So when you see those type of things, you have to think about, electric vehicles, renewable energy, military hardware, things like that. The goal here is to ensure that those resources are easily available for the American economic markets. Now, in the next part where they talk about helping Gabon identify paths to market for critical resource development, that basically means they want to guide or dictate to Gabon exactly where those resources should be going, which is Western supply chains. This is not about helping Gabon become more independent or self-sufficient. No, it's about Gabon's resources being funneled out of the country and into American industries. The next part where they talk about the availability of funds, right? That's basically saying that we are only going to help you if it's in our financial interest. They're not going to, like I said, no nation is in the business of doing charity. Nations are in the business of defending their interests. So they're only going to invest if they know that there's going to be a guarantee of a return on investment. So all this talk about, we're here to benefit the people of Gabon and we want to help the blacks of Gabon, that's just political theater, right? The real beneficiaries are going to be the American corporations and American economic interests. That is it, and that is all. If the United States and really any of the Western powers were truly concerned about Gabon being self-sufficient and being independent and being prosperous, then they would be supporting policies that allow Gabon to develop its own industries and retain control over its own resources. But obviously that's not what's happening. This is about positioning Gabon as a resource provider for the Western powers by keeping the wealth flowing outward to Western economies while Gabon remains underdeveloped. That's pretty much the playbook for the Western strategists. Now let's continue. Take a look up on the screen. The United States is also committed to increasing our security partnerships with Gabon and expanding the Gabonese security forces' capabilities to combat their internal security threats and contribute to regional security. Now, when the United States government says that they want to combat the internal security threats in Gabon, we have to ask some questions. Number one, from what I can tell, Gabon is one of the more stable countries on the continent. I don't think there's any jihadist insurgencies, any civil wars, any violent uprisings happening in Gabon. So why would the United States need to expand the military capabilities or expand the internal security of Gabon? Like I said, it all goes back to protecting Western economic interests, right? Like I said, we spoke about the immense mineral resources of Gabon and how the United States wants to strengthen those economic partnerships, right? So these foreign corporations, they are backed and supported by the militaries of their home nations. So by so-called strengthening Gabon's security forces, what the United States is really doing is safeguarding the infrastructure and the industries that are critical to the flow of those resources, right? We need to protect our supply chains. We need to protect our, factories, our corporations. We need to make sure that it's a stable environment for business to be conducted. And also this ties back to political continuity because the military presence will ensure that any potential opposition within the country can be quickly neutralized, right? The United States is not here to help Gabon become a powerful military in the region and increase their military technology. No, they are here to make sure that they can maintain control over the population in case there's any future uprisings, that can threaten economic operations. In case somebody wants to overthrow the government, they can quickly, move in and neutralize the threat. That's why you see nations like France having a military presence in countries like Senegal. Like, why do you have a military presence in Senegal? Senegal is a peaceful nation, right? Why do you have a military presence in Ivory Coast? Ivory Coast is a peaceful nation, right? That's because they want to maintain the control and the stability of the economic operations. Now, take a look up on the screen. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met on October 1st with Gabon's transitional president, Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema. Secretary Blinken received an update on Gabon's democratic transition and reaffirmed the United States' commitment to supporting Gabon's efforts to implement an inclusive and transparent political process culminating in free and fair elections. Both agreed to take concrete steps to deepen the bilateral relationship based on shared priorities, including economic and social development, maritime and border security, environmental conservation, and security cooperation. Now, as we can see, the buzzwords being used again: free and fair elections, deepening bilateral relations, etc., etc. Now, I had read in another article that the United States plans to offer a $5 million grant for the next elections in Gabon, right, through the USAID. And the USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, is the U.S. government agency responsible for providing foreign aid and development assistance to other countries, right? It promotes itself as helping, with education and democracy and things like that, but it's often used as a tool to influence governments and shape their policies and ensure that U.S. interests are protected in those regions. That's really all it's about, man. Everything always comes back to the defense of U.S. economic and political interests, which is totally fine. A nation is supposed to protect their interests. I have no issue with that. A nation is supposed to defend the interests of their citizens. That's how it goes. That's life. But when the United States offers millions of dollars through the USAID for the next so-called free and fair elections, like I said, this is not charity. This is not a gift. It comes with strings attached. Those $5 million is going to make sure that the election process aligns with U.S. interests, making sure the candidate who is running, who is going to defend Western interests, making sure that he is the one who gets in power, making sure that he's the one that gets in the seat. The money coming from the USAID allows the U.S. government to monitor and influence the politics of Gabon. And if the government wants that money to keep coming in, they have to remain aligned with U.S. interests, right? So you want this money, you better play ball. That's how it goes, man. They're not doing charity. Don't listen to these dudes who talk about, oh, man, we sending all this money to these different countries. No, you're not. You're influencing the political landscape of these countries to benefit your citizens. You're not here doing charity and all this bullshit talking about, oh, my tax dollars going overseas. No, your tax dollars are going overseas to defend U.S. imperialism and make sure that United States remains a prosperous nation. That's what it's about, man. Now, in summary, like I said, I believe in the sovereignty of African nations. So a nation has the right to do business and have relations with anybody they want to have relations with. My only issue is that when it comes to the Western powers, these relations are they're not balanced, right? These are not balanced agreements. Business should be good business, right? So it shouldn't be a case where one side is overwhelmingly benefiting while the other side is, not really getting much out the deal. For example, take a look up on the screen. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, foreign companies extracting high-value minerals often fail to reinvest their profits in the country. Instead, they repatriate the majority of their earnings, leading to capital flight and depriving the Congo of the funds needed for development. Nigeria loses an estimated $18 billion annually to illicit financial flows, including tax evasion and misinvoicing of trade by multinational corporations. These illicit outflows deprive the country of much needed revenue for development and public services. So, as you can see, these Western multinational corporations are heavily invested in maintaining access to the black man's land and the black man's natural resources. They talk about the immigrants coming to our country and taking up our tax dollars and taking up our social services and taking up our resources. But they don't talk about the resource extraction taking place overseas in our countries and our lands, depriving our citizens of the money needed to develop and give them a prosperous future and a prosperous way of life. The reality is their prosperity is our demise, right? Their wealth comes at our expense. Their fortune is built on top of our misfortune. Their advancement is our downfall. Their prosperity demands our sacrifice. Now, unfortunately, this dynamic creates the false narrative that black nations are charity cases, right? African nations are charity cases dependent on foreign aid to survive. But the reality, like I said earlier, is the exact opposite. It's these Western economies, these Western nations that rely on African resources to power their industries and their economies, right? The black man's land and the black man's resources are what keeps the Western economies afloat. Without access to these things, these economies would collapse in no time. We've already seen what happens when that access is cut off. You remember a few months back, Niger, for example, they expelled the French multinational corporation Orano. And within a matter of months, the company began to report hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. And that shows you the true dynamic at play here. The true dynamic is it's the Western powers who are the true dependents. They're the ones who the charity cases. They're the ones clinging to African resources to sustain themselves for dear life. And in fact, I just seen a headline recently. Take a look up on the screen. Mali says Barrick Gold, I believe that's I believe that's a Canadian multinational, owes $500 million in taxes and fines, right? So now, due to the fact that, like I said, these Western companies, they're not in the business of doing good business, right? They are here to create these lopsided agreements, and in return, they don't even want to pay their taxes. So now Mali has to run after these multinational corporations to pay their taxes. And like I said, that is why they do not want to have a leader in power, a leader who they cannot blackmail, a leader who is not engaged in any type of corrupt dealings. You see, the president of Mali, Assimi Goïta, he don't got a mansion, overseas in the United States. He don't got a house in Boston. He don't got an offshore bank account. So they can't really blackmail him. So he can take these measures to go against these multinational corporations. The president of Niger, he's not involved in any type of activities that would compromise his integrity. So he can tell the French mining companies to get the fuck out the country, right? You see, the president of Gabon, he's engaged in all type of, corruption and criminality. He got a house in Maryland. He got, millions of dollars in business interests overseas. So he is compromised. He is compromised. He is the perfect puppet. He is the perfect vassal to ensure that Western interests are protected. Now, like I said before, relative to its size, Gabon is a relatively small country. But when you take into account the the immense supply of mineral resources, I mean, Gabon should be one of the most prosperous destinations on the planet, right? It should be one of the most prosperous places in the world, to be honest. If the leader of Gabon was not compromised and corrupt, he should be taking a similar action to what Ibrahim Traoré is doing in Burkina Faso. I believe I reported on this last year. Back in November last year, Burkina Faso began the construction of a first gold refinery that I believe should be taking effect at the end of this year in 2024. Now, this is what real leadership looks like. This is what true economic independence looks like, right? Taking control of your valuable resources, building the infrastructure to refine it yourself. So now, instead of the money being extracted and sent back to, Canada or the United States or France or whatever, you ensure that the money remains circulating in the economy. So now you can reinvest that money into other sectors that can benefit the population. This is what happens when you have a leader who is not compromised, right? When you have a leader who is free from corruption, who cannot be blackmailed. These are the things you are able to do, right? If Gabon were to go down this path, it could easily become one of the wealthiest nations on the entire continent and in the entire world. The resources are already there. What's missing is the infrastructure and the leadership with the integrity to build it. But of course, like I said, the Western nations are not invested in supporting leadership with integrity, right? They're not interested in supporting leadership who has the vision to establish a future of prosperity for their people. Unfortunately, that would go against their economic interests. But anyways, man, it's your boy Neferkar. That's Salim back in the Billy. Yes, indeed. Cash App in the description. Support the channel, man. Support the channel. Support the album. Peace.
Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we young. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word and it's bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Back in my city, they loving me. Standing alone, I'm 100 deep. Enemy plotting is still in reach. They try to make sure that we underneath. Trying to make sure that we never make it. Coming for power, come get acquainted. Coming for everything that I wanted. Feeling like Drake, but I really wrote it. Feeling like Kendrick, I'm checking names. Gotta roll up while I go insane. Got so much stress, I've been gained weight. Stuffing these racks in this Louis case. One thing for certain, I'm about to check. Keep it 100 and nothing less. Stick with the family since day one. Had to stay down till my day come. Had to stay down, but I'm never patient. Hop on the mic and I'm motivated. Hop on the mic and I drop a classic. Haters can't see me, they copping glasses. Back in the studio making magic. Got a new tape and it's in production. Back on my business, I got a budget. Staying low key when I'm out in public. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we young. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word and it's bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news.